What happened when the hosts of The View pushed Melania Trump too far? The 100 million answer shocked the world. On the set of Prime Hour Live, viewers tuning in expected the usual blend of humor and sharp political debate hosted by Bill Carter, the celebrated talk show host known for his relentless questioning. Tonight's guest, however, wasn't part of the typical lineup. Melania Trump, the First Lady and recent plaintiff in a 100 million defamation lawsuit against The View hosts, took her place on stage. Her composed demeanor hinted at an inner storm, while Bill's polished grin betrayed his eagerness to dig deeper. What started as another evening of pointed commentary quickly spiraled into an unforgettable confrontation. The fallout would leave the audience and the world speechless. Before we dive into this unforgettable story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And please give us a like. If you love inspiring tales with a twist, make sure to subscribe and let's grow together in 2025. The studio lights burned bright, their glare reflected in the polished glass of the desk. The audience, a sea of expectant faces, buzzed with energy. It was the kind of atmosphere that promised something unforgettable. On the main stage of The View, the hosts were seated, their signature mugs resting before them. The day's topic? Melania Trump, the First Lady, enigmatic figure, and a lightning rod for controversy. I mean, who even likes Christmas that much? Joy Behar quipped, leaning forward with a smirk. We all saw that tape. The audience erupted into laughter, punctuated by gasps. They loved Joy's brash humor, the way she poked at sacred cows without flinching. Today, though, the jokes felt sharper, the edges less forgiving. Sonny Hostin, ever the voice of reason, raised a hand. Look, I get it. Being the First Lady is a unique pressure, but destroying the Rose Garden? That's another story. She didn't even want to be there. Whoopi Goldberg interjected, her tone conspiratorial. You think someone like her wants to spend 4 years in the White House? Please. What began as banter quickly spiraled into pointed critiques, each comment adding fuel to a fire no one saw coming. Then came the remark that shifted everything. Let's be honest, Sonny Hostin said, her voice dripping with incredulity. Melania hates him. She didn't want to marry him in the first place. And now she's stuck. The others nodded in agreement, creating a chorus of speculation that painted Melania as a trapped, unhappy wife. Another host chimed in. Can you imagine? Being married to someone who's had so many scandals, allegedly cheating while she was pregnant, sneaking around with Stormy Daniels. It's a nightmare. Oh, and don't forget, Joy added with a dramatic roll of her eyes, the whole I don't care, do you, jacket? That really screamed, I'm here for the American people, didn't it? The conversation escalated further, with Whoopi shaking her head in mock disbelief. And then there's the Christmas thing. She hates Christmas. Who hates Christmas? It's like she just couldn't wait to say, I don't want to decorate. Get me out of here. Sonny leaned back. She couldn't resist a jab. It's one thing to be private, but she's practically invisible. She avoided events, barely spoke, and when she did, it was so scripted. It's like she didn't want to be part of it at all. The audience's reaction was electric. Gasps mingled with laughter, creating a crackling tension in the room. As the segment continued, the remarks became increasingly personal, delving into Melania's marriage, demeanor, and even her mothering style. Can we talk about the irony? Ana Navarro said, leaning forward with a smirk. She's out here releasing a video about individual freedom while being married to the guy who overturned Roe v. Wade. Like, come on. The audience roared in approval, and Joy seized the moment. Right? My body, my choice, but not for the rest of us. She's trying to rewrite her story, but it's not fooling anyone. The comments were cutting, invasive, and deeply personal. Speculation about her marriage, her role as First Lady, and her personal happiness spilled out across the airwaves with a recklessness that seemed calculated to provoke. What should have been light-hearted commentary had turned into a barrage of accusations. By the end of the segment, the hosts had painted a picture of Melania as a discontented, reluctant participant in her own life, a woman trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. The fallout came swiftly. Within hours, clips of the segment were circulating online. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and hashtags. The comments section was a battlefield, split between those who defended the hosts and those who condemned them. For Melania, it was a turning point. Sitting in her penthouse, she watched the clips with icy detachment. Her publicist's voice buzzed over the speakerphone. "We can issue a statement," the publicist suggested. Something simple, like, "These claims are baseless and defamatory." Melania's gaze didn't waver from the screen. She paused the video on Sunny's face, her words hanging in the air like smoke. "No," Melania said, her accent sharp as glass. "We sue." The decision sent shockwaves through the media. News outlets scrambled to cover the breaking story. Melania Trump files $100 million defamation lawsuit against The View. The clip from the segment played on an endless loop. Analysts debated the implications, questioning whether the hosts had crossed a line. Backstage at The View, the mood was tense. Joy paced the green room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "It's ridiculous," she fumed. "She's a public figure. We're allowed to have opinions." "Opinions," Sunny countered gently, "not accusations." Whoopi leaned back in her chair, unbothered. Let her try. "We've got lawyers too." But even as they put on a united front, cracks began to show. Producers started whispering about potential settlements. Lawyers advised caution. The stakes were too high to ignore. Meanwhile, Melania's camp prepared for battle. The lawsuit was meticulously crafted. Each allegation was carefully considered, each claim precisely documented. Melania's legal team was sending a clear message: there are boundaries that cannot be crossed, even in the world of entertainment television. Her legal team was formidable, a collection of high-powered attorneys known for their no-nonsense approach. In press conferences, they spoke with precision, outlining their case without revealing too much. "This is not about silencing free speech," one lawyer explained. "This is about holding people accountable for false and damaging statements." Behind the scenes, the preparation was intense. Her legal experts pored over every word spoken on the show, examining the fine line between free speech and defamation. Melania herself was resolute. This was about more than just protecting her reputation. It was about establishing a critical precedent for how public figures are treated in the media. But those who knew Melania understood this was deeply personal. Throughout her time as First Lady, she had maintained a dignified silence, enduring countless speculative stories and personal attacks. Now, she was drawing a line in the sand. Melania knew she needed to address the public directly, so she only hesitated briefly. When the invitation from Bill Carter's team arrived, the controversial talk show host was notorious for his sharp questioning and unapologetically liberal stance. Yet despite his reputation, Melania accepted the invitation. Her decision wasn't driven by impulse or emotion, but by a calculated resolve to show the world who she truly was. Beyond the tabloid headlines and viral soundbites, the camera panned across a buzzing live audience in New York City, their faces alight with anticipation. The set of Prime Hour Live was a vibrant tableau of sleek design and high energy. Its warm, inviting hues contrasting with the electric tension in the air. The program, a cornerstone of late-night commentary, was known for its sharp wit and no-holds-barred interviews. At the center of it all was Bill Carter, a celebrated and controversial host renowned for his incisive questioning and unapologetically progressive views. Perched confidently on his leather chair, his trademark smirk hinted at both charm and challenge. Tonight was supposed to follow the usual formula, a mix of satire, cultural critique, and spirited discussions. Until it didn't. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bill began, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who knows how to hold a room. Our next guest needs no introduction. The First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump. A hushed murmur rippled through the audience. For weeks, her name had been dominating headlines, not for another elegant appearance or cryptic statement, but for the explosive defamation lawsuit filed against The View. Many questioned her decision to break her silence after years of enigmatic restraint. Now, she was here, stepping into the lion's den of public opinion. The stage lights dimmed slightly as Melania emerged from behind the curtain. Dressed in a tailored navy ensemble that radiated understated elegance, she walked with a deliberate, steady grace. Her expression was calm but resolute, betraying none of the storm that had engulfed her life over the past months. The applause was polite but cautious, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Bill stood to greet her, his hand outstretched in a gesture that felt almost rehearsed. She accepted it with a faint smile, her demeanor as inscrutable as ever. "Mrs. Trump, thank you for joining us tonight," Bill said as they took their seats. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, her accent soft but distinct. The room seemed to lean in collectively, every eye glued to the unfolding tableau. What began as a standard introduction would soon take a turn. No one could have predicted a moment that would leave audiences both in the studio and across the nation questioning everything they thought they knew about Melania Trump. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Bill began, his tone professional yet probing. "Your lawsuit against The View has raised significant questions about media boundaries and free speech." Melania met his gaze without flinching. "I'm here to speak truth," she responded, "not to entertain speculation." The audience leaned forward. This wasn't going to be a passive interview. Bill pressed further. "Many are questioning your motivations. Some say this lawsuit is about publicity, others about principle. Which is it?" A subtle smile crossed Melania's face. "It's about accountability. Words have consequences. Speculation is not journalism." The conversation escalated, layer by layer. Bill referenced specific comments from The View hosts. The claims about her marriage, her unhappiness in the White House, her alleged disinterest in her role as First Lady. These weren't just comments, Melania said, her voice gaining momentum. These were calculated attacks designed to diminish my character, my choices, my agency. Bill leaned forward, his tone professional yet sharp. "Let's discuss some specific comments that sparked your lawsuit, shall we?" Melania nodded, her posture unchanged. "A study in composure. One host claimed you hate your husband." Bill began, "that you don't want to be in the same room with him. What's your response?" A momentary pause. Then Melania's response cut through the tension. "Marriage is complex. Anyone who suggests they understand the entirety of a relationship from the outside is foolish. My commitment has always been about integrity, not public perception." Bill pressed further. "They suggested you were unhappy being First Lady, that you didn't want the role." Melania's eyes narrowed slightly. "Every role comes with challenges, but I chose to focus on making a positive impact. My work with children's initiatives, my approach to the position, these were deliberate choices, not reluctant obligations." The studio fell silent. The audience hung on every word. "Another controversial claim," Bill continued, "was about your Christmas decorations. A host suggested you hate Christmas and deliberately undermined White House traditions." A subtle smile crossed Melania's face. "Traditions evolve. When I redesigned the Rose Garden, it wasn't about destruction. It was about preservation and renewal. Every change tells a story, not of hatred, but of respect for continued growth." The interview was transforming. What began as a potential ambush was becoming a masterclass in dignified response. "They discussed your marriage extensively," Bill said, "suggesting infidelity, unhappiness, separation. How do you respond to such personal attacks?" Melania's voice was steady. "My personal life is not a spectacle. Those who create narratives about my marriage reveal more about themselves than about me. Respect isn't just about what you say. It's about what you choose not to say. Bill seemed momentarily taken aback. The hosts of The View had painted a picture of a trapped, unhappy woman, but the woman sitting across from him was anything but passive. One particularly inflammatory comment suggested you were, essentially, a prisoner in your own marriage. Bill noted that you were desperately unhappy and wanted to escape. Melania's laugh was soft but cutting. Escape? I am not a woman who needs to escape. I am a woman who chooses her path. My life has never been about being a victim. It's about being a partner, a mother, an individual with agency. The studio was electric. This wasn't just an interview. It was a reclamation. Each response was a surgical strike against the narrative that had been constructed about her. Melania wasn't just defending herself. She was dismantling a carefully crafted media myth. As the interview progressed, it became clear this was more than a legal battle. It was a statement about media responsibility, about the right to define one's own narrative. Bill's question hung in the air. But why this lawsuit? Why now? Melania's answer was powerful in its simplicity. Because silence can be mistaken for weakness. Because words have power. And because someone must stand up and say, enough is enough. The studio erupted in applause. And as it rippled through the studio, Bill Carter felt the weight of the moment settle uncomfortably on his shoulders. The crowd, which had arrived primed to cheer his sharp wit and piercing questions, was now leaning into Melania's every word. He could feel the subtle shift in energy, an intangible but undeniable pivot. The carefully controlled narrative he had constructed with his questioning was unraveling, thread by thread, under her composed defiance. He forced a smile, his usual confidence faltering. The claps grew louder, some members of the audience rising from their seats. In a wave of unexpected admiration for the First Lady, Bill shifted in his chair, his body language betraying his discomfort. His polished grin faltered, a flicker of frustration flashing in his eyes as he realized the crowd was no longer on his side. For a moment, he glanced at the teleprompter, searching for a segue, a lifeline to regain control. His team behind the scenes, visible through the glass of the control room, gestured urgently, their faces a mix of alarm and determination. But there was no saving this moment. Bill had underestimated her ability to turn the narrative, to stand her ground with grace and conviction. Melania's poise only deepened the chasm forming between Bill and his audience. She sat with an almost regal calm, unshaken by the intensity of the debate. It was clear to everyone in the room that her words were landing not as rehearsed lines, but as truths spoken from experience. Her statement, because silence can be misinterpreted as acceptance, lingered in the air like an undeniable verdict. Bill tried to recover, leaning forward and forcing a chuckle. Well, that's certainly one way to put it, he said, his tone a shade too forced. But the audience wasn't buying it. The murmurs of approval for Melania continued, breaking his rhythm and undermining his usual ability to steer the conversation back to safer ground. As he prepared his next question, his confidence had been replaced with a growing sense of unease. This was not how the evening was supposed to go, and it was clear to everyone that Melania Trump had turned the tide. The interview continued, a masterclass in grace under fire. Melania fielded questions with poise, her responses measured and reflective. By the end of the segment, the audience had softened, their skepticism giving way to a grudging respect. By the next morning, hashtags like Melania Speaks trended nationwide. Pundits, politicians, and public figures weighed in, but the message was clear. Melania Trump was no longer willing to be a footnote in someone else's story. She was writing her own chapter, and the world was watching. As the legal battle approached, one thing became abundantly clear. Melania Trump was no longer content to be a silent figure in the background. She had found her voice, and it was thunderously loud. The lawsuit raised profound questions about media responsibility. Where exactly did the line between commentary and defamation exist? How much scrutiny could public figures be expected to endure? The case promised to be a landmark moment in the ongoing dialogue about media ethics and personal privacy. Interestingly, Melania's approach stood in stark contrast to her husband's typical media strategy. While Donald Trump often engaged directly with his critics, Melania chose a more measured approach. The hosts of The View found themselves on the defensive. What had seemed like casual commentary now looked potentially catastrophic. The 100 million lawsuit wasn't just a financial threat, it was a reputational minefield. Their typical bravado was replaced by a cautious legal strategy. Every word would now be carefully weighed, every comment meticulously considered. Melania's lawsuit represented a broader cultural moment, a pushback against the casual cruelty that had become normalized in media discourse. It was a reminder that even public figures have boundaries. That speculation is not the same as truth. The case promised to be a defining moment in media law. If Melania prevailed, it could fundamentally reshape how talk shows, news outlets, and entertainment programs discussed public figures. The potential implications were enormous. The confrontation between Melania Trump and Bill Carter transcended the boundaries of a typical interview, becoming a poignant lesson in the power of composure and conviction. For Melania, it was a reclaiming of her narrative, and a reminder that even under intense scrutiny, truth and resilience can prevail. For the audience and the world watching, it was a powerful reflection on the ethical weight of public discourse and the responsibility to balance freedom of speech with respect and fairness. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Subscribe to the channel and select the next video recommended on the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.